Have you ever answered a phone call you knew you shouldn't? The kind that makes your gut tighten before you even pick it up? The kind where the silence on the other end feels aware? That's what I thought about the night it started. It was 1:47 a.m., and the studio was quiet except for the low hum of the equipment and the scratch of static from the monitor. I was halfway through another graveyard shift at WZRD 97.3 FM, the kind of local station people only tune into when they can't sleep. My job was simple: keep the music flowing, read the weather, take the occasional call from a lonely trucker or insomniac. I'd done it for years. Nothing ever really changed. Until that night. The call board lit up suddenly. One line. No caller ID, just the words, unknown number. That wasn't unusual. People used burner phones, blocked numbers. I pressed the blinking red button, leaned in close to the mic, and said my usual line. "You're on with Midnight Mike. What's keeping you up tonight?" For a moment, only static hissed on the other end. Not silence. Static. A low, rushing white noise that prickled the hair on my arms. I was about to disconnect when I heard it, faint, almost lost beneath the static. Mike? My heart jolted. It wasn't the word that shook me. It was the voice. Because I knew it. Knew it down to my bones. It was my sister's voice. The sister I buried 12 years ago. I froze, staring at the mic as though it could explain what I'd just heard. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe it was a prank, maybe someone with a similar voice, maybe my exhausted mind was playing tricks. But then the voice came again, clearer, sharper, slicing through the static. "Mike, why won't you answer me?" I slammed the mute button, heart racing. My producer wasn't here. Graveyard shifts meant I was alone in the booth. No witnesses. Just me and that voice. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real. This can't be real." I unmuted, my hand shaking. "Who is this?" The static roared, then softened, like a breath being drawn in. And then, "You know who I am." I could hear her. God, it sounded exactly like her. The same soft rasp when she was tired, the same tone she used when she wanted me to listen. For a moment, I almost believed. But that was impossible. She'd died in a car accident when I was 21. I'd stood at her coffin. I'd touched her cold hand. I'd wept until I couldn't breathe. And now, she was calling me from the other side of a phone line. "Don't do this," I whispered. "Whoever you are, don't." The voice didn't argue. It just whispered my name again. And then the line went dead. I sat frozen in the dim red glow of the on-air light, my chest tight, my throat dry. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The static still buzzed faintly through the headphones, even though the call had ended. And then the phone rang again. Same line. Same unknown number. I stared at it, every instinct in me screaming not to answer. But my hand moved anyway. The line pulsed again, glowing red on the board, each blink like the slow beat of a heart. I sat frozen, headphones still warm against my ears, staring at that tiny square of light as though it could burn a hole through me. My breath fogged the glass of the booth window. Everything inside me screamed the same warning: don't answer. Don't touch it. Don't let it in. And yet, almost against my will, my fingers reached out. They hovered above the button, trembling, and then pressed down. "You're on with Midnight Mike," I said, my voice catching, betraying the tremor I couldn't hide. At first there was only static. But not random static. This was something else. It had a rhythm to it, like breathing, like someone inhaling and exhaling on the other end of the line. My pulse quickened as I listened, waiting for the voice. And then it came. "Mike." I shut my eyes. That same voice, that same impossible familiarity. My sister's voice, but thinner this time, stretched like a cassette tape being chewed up. It dragged through the line, distorted by the hiss, and yet it was undeniably hers. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as dust. "This isn't funny," I whispered, too low for the mic to pick up. Whoever you are, stop this. The static crackled. And then her laugh came through. Not loud. Not mocking. Just a short, familiar laugh, the kind she used to make when she thought I was being overly serious. My blood ran cold. "Don't you miss me?" the voice asked. My breath caught. I almost ripped the headphones off, almost bolted from the booth, but my body refused to move. I was rooted to the chair, trapped between terror and the faint, dangerous spark of longing. Because the truth was, I did miss her. Every day. Every night. Her loss had hollowed me out in ways I'd never admitted to anyone. And now, here she was, speaking to me through static. "I don't understand," I finally choked out. How are you doing this?" For a long moment, only the rushing hiss of static filled the air. Then, softly, "You don't have to understand. You just have to listen." The board flickered. The signal meter jumped, even though I wasn't playing music, even though no one should have been transmitting anything. The static wasn't just in my headphones anymore, it bled through the speakers, faint but undeniable, like a ghost pushing its way into the broadcast. I scrambled, adjusting dials, trying to mute the feed, but the sound didn't stop. It clung to the equipment, crawling into every channel. And then I heard something layered beneath it, voices. Not one, not two, but dozens, maybe hundreds, whispering beneath the static. Some were too faint to make out, others rose sharply for a second before sinking back down. It was like tuning into 1,000 stations at once, every one of them filled with ghosts. My stomach dropped. And then one voice cut through clearly, as sharp as glass. "Don't let her in." I froze. That wasn't my sister's voice. It was a man's, low and urgent, buried in the static like someone gasping from underwater. "Who are you?" I whispered. The static roared in response, drowning him out, and then her voice returned, louder now, almost pleading. "Mike, please. It's me. Don't you hear me? Don't you remember me?" Tears stung my eyes. God help me, I wanted to believe. Every rational part of me screamed that this was a trick, a glitch, a hallucination brought on by too much caffeine and too many sleepless nights. But the voice had weight. It had her. And then she said something that broke me. "Do you remember the night you left me at the lake?" My heart stopped. That wasn't public. That wasn't something anyone else could know. It was one of those tiny, unremarkable childhood memories we never told anyone. I'd been 16, she'd been 14. I'd left her sitting by the dock while I ran back to grab a forgotten flashlight. When I returned, she'd been humming to herself, the moonlight on her face, the water black and endless behind her. I hadn't thought of that night in years. But she remembered. Whoever, or whatever, was on the line knew details that belonged only to us. "Mike," she whispered, her voice dissolving in and out of the static, "don't hang up on me again. Not this time." The line crackled violently, the board lights flaring red and green, alarms on the console flickering though I hadn't touched them. My headphones filled with that chorus of voices again, screaming, whispering, weeping, as though the static itself had 100 mouths. I ripped the headset off, panting, my ears ringing. But the sound didn't stop. It was still coming through the speakers. Filling the studio. Crawling along the walls. And through it all, my sister's voice rose above the others, steady, insistent. "Pick up the phone, Mike. I'm waiting." I looked down. The line was flashing again. Unknown number. Blink. 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 This time, the light wasn't waiting for me to press it. The button depressed on its own. The button depressed with a soft click, though my hand hadn't touched it. I lurched backward in my chair, heart jackhammering against my ribs, eyes locked on that blinking light as though it were a snake uncoiling on the board. The line hissed alive, flooding the studio with static so loud it made my teeth ache. "Mike." Her voice, impossibly close, like she was speaking from just inches away from my ear. I twisted in my chair, scanning the booth, certain I'd find her standing there, pale and grinning, pressed against the glass. But the room was empty. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I yanked my headphones back on, desperate to contain the noise, but the static still bled into the studio monitors, rattling the thin walls, seeping into the air like smoke. "Why did you leave me?" she whispered. The words hit me like a knife. I gripped the edge of the desk, nails digging into the laminate. "I didn't leave you. That night wasn't my fault." Her laugh slithered through the static, warping in pitch, echoing in layers. "Not that night, Mike. The other night." My blood froze. "What are you talking about?" I croaked, though some part of me already knew. The line sizzled, warped, and then sharpened into a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years. Her last night. The night the car went off the road. The night the police told me they couldn't save her. "You promised you'd come back for me," she said, her tone accusing, broken. "But you never did." Tears blurred my vision. The memory hit me with suffocating force, her face framed in flashing ambulance lights, my hands bound in the useless act of holding pressure against a wound too deep. Her eyes had locked on mine as her lips mouthed something I could never hear over the chaos. And then, nothing. Just the silence that had followed me all these years. I tore the headphones off again, pressing the heels of my palms into my eyes until I saw sparks. This isn't real. It can't be real. But when I lowered my hands, the studio was worse. The monitors glitched, the on-air light flickering like a strobe. The waveform screens danced with jagged, nonsensical patterns that pulsed like heartbeats. And beneath it all, I heard the whispers, the others. Not just my sister anymore. "Don't let her out. He can hear us now. You shouldn't have answered." The voices were layered, overlapping, a chorus of despair and fury carried through waves of static. My mouth went dry. My legs refused to move. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice bouncing hollowly off the booth walls. The whispers stopped. For a second, the silence was absolute. Then a single voice, male, harsh and urgent, cut through like broken glass. "They're not who they say they are. Don't believe her." The line screeched, drowning him out, as though something didn't want me to hear. My sister's voice surged back, louder, sharper, frantic. "Mike, listen to me. He's lying. Don't you recognize me? Don't you remember how I used to sing you to sleep when you had nightmares?" I shut my eyes, clutching the headphones, shaking my head. No. 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 That detail was true too. When I was little, she would sit on the edge of my bed, humming softly until I drifted off. That memory was sacred, something only she and I had shared. But then another whisper rose beneath hers, repeating the same phrase over and over. "She knows because you told her. She knows because you told her. She knows because you told her." I snapped my eyes open. My reflection in the booth window caught me off guard. I looked pale, hollow-eyed, sweat dripping down my temples. But there was something wrong. The reflection's lips were moving, but mine were not. It was mouthing the words in sync with the whispers. "She knows because you told her." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair, the headphones sliding halfway off my head. The reflection smiled, faint and unnatural, while mine did not. The phone line popped, sharp enough to make me flinch. And then, dead air. No static. No voices. No sound at all. I stood there, paralyzed, the silence pressing in like a vacuum. Then the studio phone, not the call board, but the landline bolted to the wall, rang. The shrill sound cut through the air, piercing, relentless. I stared at it, my chest heaving. Nobody called that line. Not ever. It rang again. And again. Each peal louder than the last, vibrating through my bones. Finally, my hand moved without me, as though pulled by invisible strings. I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse. On the other end, in perfect clarity, came my sister's voice. "I'm not in the static anymore, Mike. I'm almost there." The line went dead. And then, Behind me, the door to the booth creaked open. The creak of the booth door was so soft, so painfully ordinary, that for one suspended second I thought maybe, just maybe, it was one of the interns playing a prank. Maybe some kid had slipped in, maybe I wasn't losing my mind, maybe there was a sane explanation. But then I remembered, there were no interns tonight. The station had cut back staff months ago. I was alone in the building. My throat tightened as I turned. The booth door hung ajar, just an inch or two, a pale wedge of hallway light spilling across the soundproofing foam. I stared at it, willing it to move again, to close, to swing open, to do anything that would prove this wasn't my imagination. "Hello?" My voice cracked, small and uncertain, swallowed almost instantly by the booth's thick silence. No answer. My heart pounded in my ears. Slowly, I stepped toward the door, every footfall deliberate, the boards under my shoes creaking in protest. I pushed it shut with trembling fingers, half expecting resistance, like something on the other side might be pushing back. But the door closed with a simple click, smooth and clean, as though it had never been opened at all. I stood there with my hand on the knob, frozen, listening. The silence pressed against me, heavy and suffocating, until I almost missed it, so faint at first I thought it was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. A whisper. Not through the speakers. Not through the headphones. Not through any equipment at all. It came from behind the door. I pressed my ear against the wood, every muscle in my body screaming against the decision, and I heard it, them. Dozens of voices, layered and low, overlapping murmurs, speaking in fragments that slipped in and out of coherence. "Don't let her in. He can't tell the difference. You've already opened the door once." I jerked back, heart in my throat. The landline on the wall rang again. The sound blasted through the booth like a physical force, and this time it didn't come in steady intervals, it rang erratically, as if whoever was calling couldn't control themselves, each shrill note overlapping the last. I stared at it, terror rooting me in place. My sister's words replayed in my head, "I'm almost there." I didn't want to answer. God, I didn't. But my body betrayed me again. My hand lifted, my arm stretched, my fingers curled around the receiver before I even realized what I was doing. The phone clicked open. For a moment, nothing. Just the faint hiss of an open line. Then, laughter. Not my sister's this time. Not familiar at all. A dozen voices laughing in unison, jagged and broken, as though a crowd was packed into the other end of the line. The laughter grew, warped, rising to a pitch that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I slammed the receiver down. But the laughter didn't stop. It was in the booth with me now, reverberating off the walls, weaving itself into the hum of the monitors and the faint static still leaking from the board. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound tunneled in anyway, vibrating through my bones. And then, just as abruptly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. That's when I saw it. My reflection again, in the booth glass. Only this time, it wasn't just off by a smile. It was moving differently. The me in the glass tilted his head at a slow, unnatural angle, studying me like an insect pinned under glass. His eyes gleamed too bright, his grin stretched too wide. I staggered back, my breath coming in sharp gasps. "No. No, you're not real." The reflection mouthed the words in perfect sync with me, until the last one. When I said real, it said something else. "Here." The lights in the booth flickered. The monitors glitched, displaying lines of text instead of waveforms. My eyes darted across them, trying to make sense of the nonsense letters and numbers scrolling faster than I could read, until the pattern became clear. It was repeating my name. Over and over. Mike. 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 I lunged forward, hitting switches, shutting down feeds, pulling power from the monitors one by one, until the booth was plunged into semi-darkness. Only the on-air light glowed, a faint red pulse in the corner. My chest heaved as I leaned on the board, sweat dripping onto the dials. And then I realized something that turned my blood cold. The on-air light meant I was still broadcasting. Everything. The whispers. The static. The laughter. My own panicked voice. It was all out there, bleeding through the radio waves into every home, every car, every pair of headphones tuned in. And if I was hearing the voices, then they were hearing them too. Somewhere out there, thousands of people were now tuned into the static. I stared at the mic, realization dawning like a nightmare peeling itself open. The voices didn't just want me. They wanted listeners. The booth phone rang again. But this time, so did my personal cell phone, buried in my pocket. 2 rings, overlapping. And deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I already knew, when I answered, I wouldn't hear just my sister. The double ring echoed through the booth, the wall phone and my cell phone overlapping in a warped duet, sharp enough to rattle my nerves raw. My hand went first to my pocket, trembling as though it wasn't really mine, as if someone else guided the motion. I pulled out the cell, the cracked screen flaring bright in the darkened booth. Unknown caller. The same words blinked across the landline's tiny LED screen, glowing like an accusation. Both phones rang in perfect sync now, the rhythm wrong, too fast, too desperate. Not like someone trying to reach me, but like something trying to force its way through. I should have thrown them both down. I should have walked out, left the station, run into the night and never looked back. But instead, my thumb slid across the glowing screen of my cell. I pressed it to my ear. And I heard breathing. Not static this time. Not whispers. Just slow, ragged breathing, like someone on the other end was struggling to keep pace with their own lungs. My pulse quickened. Hello? My voice cracked, so soft I barely recognized it. The breathing hitched. Then a voice, my voice, came through the line. Why did you answer, Mike? I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed. It was me. My cadence, my tone, my voice. But it wasn't a recording. It was alive, as if some other version of me was on the line, whispering into the receiver. I stammered, backing away from the console, clutching the phone like a live wire. What is this? The other me chuckled, a low, broken sound that made bile rise in my throat. You already know. You've been listening to us for years. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My knees weakened. Years. That couldn't be true. I had only started hearing the voices tonight. This was the first time the static had invaded the lines, wasn't it? But then memories stirred, jagged and wrong. Late nights, when I thought I heard faint murmurs between songs. Times when the boards flickered and I chalked it up to bad wiring. Dreams where I woke up sweating, convinced I'd been speaking into the mic for hours without remembering what I'd said. Had it been going on longer than tonight? You let us in every time you hit broadcast, the voice continued, calm and steady, like a teacher lecturing a child. You carried us across the airwaves, one frequency at a time. Every listener, every pair of ears, they're all ours now. My stomach dropped. As if on cue, the landline clicked, no longer ringing, but connecting. The speakers in the booth flared alive. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall, as dozens of voices poured out at once. Male, female, young, old. Some laughing, some sobbing, some whispering. They layered into a single, sickening harmony that filled the booth until I thought the walls would burst. And then one rose above the rest, crystal clear. A woman's voice. Mike? I'm listening. I heard you. I knew that voice. Not my sister's this time. It was Karen's. Karen, the night shift waitress at the diner across the street. She'd tuned into the station every night for years, calling in once in a while to request old rock ballads. She was alive, real, someone I saw 3 nights a week when I grabbed a coffee during breaks. And now she was in the static. Karen? My voice broke. Where are you? Are you okay? A pause. Then, too calm, I'm in here. We're all in here. You let us in. I shook my head violently, pressing my palms to my ears, trying to drown it out. No, this isn't happening. You're fine, you're... Her voice sharpened, almost eager. Don't fight it, Mike. It's easier when you stop fighting. Just listen. The chorus of voices swelled again, louder, overlapping, phrases crashing into each other. He's almost ready. Let us through. Don't you want to see her again? My chest tightened. My sister's voice slid in among them, honey smooth, twisting the knife. Mike. Don't you want to hear my laugh in person again? Don't you want to see me? Tears blurred my vision. God help me, I did. I wanted it more than anything. And they knew it. They knew every weak point, every scar I carried. The sound system screamed, a shrill feedback shriek that sent pain stabbing through my ears. I dropped the cell phone, hands over my head, but the voices didn't stop. They climbed higher and higher, until they weren't voices anymore but a single, unified roar. And then... the booth went black. Every light. Every monitor. Every glowing button. Gone. I was plunged into total darkness. And in that darkness, I heard the phone receiver lift itself from the hook. The sound of it cradling against an ear that wasn't mine. And then, just behind me, my sister's whisper. I'm here, Mike. The whisper brushed against my neck like a draft, too close, too real. My heart leapt into my throat, and I spun around, clawing at the dark. But there was nothing there, only the suffocating black of the powerless booth, thick as velvet, pressing down on me. Still, I could feel it, the weight of eyes. Not one pair, but dozens, watching from the dark. The tiny hairs on the back of my neck stood stiff, electricity crawling across my skin as though the static wasn't just sound anymore but air. Show yourself. I croaked, voice thin, echoing off the booth's foam walls. The silence after was worse than any answer. It stretched long, taut, until I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. And then, faintly, in the corner of the booth, I heard it, the sound of glass cracking. I froze. The booth window, the one that separated me from the control room, quivered in its frame. A fissure spread slowly across the glass, like frost creeping over a window pane in winter. But it wasn't white. It was black, a line of ink bleeding outward, jagged veins splitting into spiderwebs. I staggered back, breath hitching. The cracks deepened, each one spreading with a sickening snap, until the whole pane shimmered with fractures. And behind those cracks, something moved. Not my reflection. Not exactly. It was me, but darker, skin gray, eyes pools of black, mouth slack and hanging open. The broken reflection tilted its head, mirroring me with grotesque precision. And then, slowly, its lips curled upward into a smile. My stomach dropped. The cracked glass pulsed outward, the black veins glowing faintly, and from the speaker nearest my head came my sister's voice again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a song. Soft. Familiar. The lullaby she used to hum when I was a boy, back when the dark was just a thing under the bed, not in the walls of a radio booth. I sank to my knees, hands clamped over my ears, but the sound seeped in anyway. It wasn't just in my ears, it was inside me, vibrating in my bones, echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat. The voices rose again, dozens joining her melody. Some sang, some hummed, some screamed in rhythmless bursts that twisted the song into something jagged and grotesque. It was a choir of the damned, all funneled through the airwaves into this room. And then, with the sharp crack of breaking glass, the booth window shattered. Shards fell inward, clattering across the board, but I barely flinched. Because I wasn't staring at the broken glass. I was staring at what was standing on the other side. They filled the control room, figures pale as moonlight, outlines blurred, their bodies flickering like TV static struggling to hold shape. Their faces shifted between familiar and unknown, morphing in and out of clarity. Some were strangers, some were listeners I thought I recognized from the diner or the gas station, and some were faces I never thought I'd see again. My sister's face was among them. She smiled at me through the jagged hole where the glass had been, her form flickering, her eyes too dark, too deep. "Open the door, Mike," she said, her voice a perfect match to memory. "You don't have to be alone anymore." I stumbled back, hitting the wall, shaking my head furiously. "You're not her. You're not her." But another voice rose behind hers, sharp, insistent. A man's voice this time. "She's telling the truth. Let us in." Then another. And another. The chorus swelled, all of them begging, demanding, pleading in overlapping waves of static. "Open the door. You want to see us. You want to hear us. You already belong to us." My ears rang. My heart threatened to burst. And then, I heard something that froze me more than all the rest. A child's voice. "Daddy?" My blood ran cold. I didn't have children. Never had. But the voice was so sharp, so fragile, so real, that for a heartbeat I almost believed. Almost. I sank lower against the wall, shaking uncontrollably, as the static figures pressed closer against the broken window, their outlines warping, their bodies vibrating with hunger. And then, suddenly, everything went silent again. All at once. The booth was dark and still. The control room empty. The window unbroken. It was as though none of it had happened at all. But when I glanced at the console, my stomach dropped. The on-air light was still glowing. And the line was open. Every word, every scream, every desperate cry had been broadcast. I didn't just let them in. I let them out. The booth was still. Too still. The hum of the monitors, the faint thrum of the ventilation system, gone. In their place was a silence so thick it pressed on my chest. The only sound left was the faint hiss of the open line, slithering from the speakers like a snake coiled in the dark. My hand shook as I reached out, desperate to kill the feed. But before my fingers brushed the switch, the call board lit up. Line 1. Then line 2. Then 3, 4, 5. All of them blinking, glowing red, demanding attention. I froze. It had been years since that many people called at once. Our little late-night station barely scraped a handful of regulars anymore. And yet here it was, every line alive, blinking like a constellation. I swallowed hard, my throat raw, and pressed the first button. You're on with Midnight Mike," I stammered, my voice cracking. At first, only silence. Then a woman's voice, trembling and thin. "Mike? Is this real? Please tell me this isn't real." I gripped the edge of the console. "What do you mean?" She let out a sharp, broken laugh. "Don't play dumb." I heard them. We all heard them. The voices, the singing, the screaming. It wasn't just static. I can see them, Mike. In my house. In my mirrors. My stomach twisted. Before I could respond, line 2 lit up louder, as though demanding its turn. I punched it in. This time, a man's voice. Deep. Panicked. There in the walls. I turned off the radio, but it didn't stop. The static's in my pipes. My kids can hear it. My kids, Mike. His voice cracked into a sob, and then the line cut to dead air. The other lines blinked furiously, overlapping in their demands. I answered another, then another, and the stories poured in, spilling into each other in a sickening chorus. My dead husband called me, Mike. The television won't turn off, it just keeps showing me but I'm not moving right. My baby is laughing at the static, she's laughing, Mike, what do I do? Each call worse than the last. Each voice drenched in terror. I felt the floor sway beneath me. My grip on reality slipping thread by thread. Had I done this? Had I unleashed them? I slammed the board switches, trying to cut the lines, but the calls kept coming, forcing their way through, overlapping until the booth filled with voices from every direction. The landline shrieked again. My cell vibrated violently in my pocket, screen glowing with that same cursed label, unknown caller. And then, above all the noise, a single, familiar voice rose clear and bright. Mike. Pick me. My sister. Her tone wasn't pleading anymore. It was commanding. Sharp. Certain. And the worst part? I wanted to obey. I slammed both hands onto the board, knocking papers to the floor, sweat dripping from my temples. What do you want from me? I screamed into the mic, my voice cracking on air. The response came instantly, layered through every call, every line, every hiss of static. We want you to listen. The words vibrated through the booth, through my bones, through the wires in the walls. And then, slowly, one of the calls broke free from the pile, clearer than the rest. Mike, the voice whispered, low, trembling. They're not outside anymore. I stiffened. What do you mean? A pause. Then, almost inaudible. There, in my head. The line went dead. The booth fell silent again, save for the faint buzz of the on-air light still pulsing red, casting the room in its sick glow. I pressed my forehead to the console, trembling, bile rising in my throat. It was bigger than me now. Bigger than the booth. Bigger than the station. They were spreading. And I had given them their stage. The station had always been a second home to me. Its flaws were familiar, the way the floorboards creaked near the filing cabinets, the faint rattle of the air vents when the heater kicked in, the stubborn buzz of the fluorescent light above the break room door. But now it felt foreign, hostile, as if the very building was aware of me and eager to swallow me whole. The phones had gone quiet, but their silence was not comforting. It was worse, somehow, than the avalanche of calls. Because the static hadn't left, it had simply changed shape. At first, I thought it was feedback. A low vibration trembled through the speakers, not loud enough to broadcast but strong enough to make the glass water cup on my console tremble against the wood. I leaned closer, pressing my ear toward the soundboard, and froze. It wasn't just hiss anymore. It was breathing. Shallow, deliberate, slow breaths, inhaling and exhaling in perfect rhythm with mine. I jerked back, nearly knocking over the mic stand, and every monitor in the booth flickered at once. The screens blinked black, then green, then static, then back again, as though the station's pulse had synced with the thing living in the airwaves. I reached for the power switch to kill everything, to cut it all off, but the metal switch felt warm against my fingers. Too warm. Burning. I yanked my hand back with a hiss, staring at the faint red mark left on my palm. That's when I heard it. A voice. Not through the headphones, not over the call board, but crawling directly out of the speaker grill in front of me. A child's voice, tinny and warped. Mike, open the door. My blood turned to ice. There were no children here. I tried to convince myself it was bleed-through, some late-night broadcast from another station leaking into ours. But then the sound spread. From the corner of the booth, the old wall intercom crackled, spitting sparks before another voice slithered out, a man's voice this time, low and wet, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. Don't leave us in the dark, Mike. Keep talking. Don't stop. I stumbled back against the desk, knocking the chair over. My reflection in the booth window looked pale, hollow-eyed, mouth trembling, but I swear the reflection smiled while I didn't. Something thudded in the hallway. Once. Twice. Heavy. Measured. I turned toward the door, breath caught in my throat. The hallway beyond the glass was dark, but not empty. Shadows stretched long across the linoleum, moving even though nothing cast them. They crawled along the walls, twitching in jagged bursts, their outlines indistinct but unmistakably human. And then, from the intercom again, in that same child's voice. They're here for you, Mike. You invited them. My chest tightened. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, desperate to escape. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to get out, but the building itself seemed to thrum with presence. Where would I even go? If I stepped into the hall, would those shadows let me pass, or would they press themselves into me, fill me up until I wasn't me anymore? I pressed my palms against my temples, rocking back and forth like some desperate patient trying to calm the storm inside. It's not real, I whispered. It's just the static. It's just the static. But the static answered. Not in one voice, but in dozens. All the callers I had heard that night. My sister. The grieving widow. The father with children. The man in the walls. All speaking at once, overlapping until the air itself felt thick with their presence. Mike, don't hang up. Mike, we can see you. Mike, you're almost ready. Ready for what? The question drilled into my skull, echoing louder than the voices, louder than the thudding in the hallway, louder than my own pulse screaming for escape. And then I realized something that made my knees buckle. The on-air light above the booth door was still glowing. I hadn't turned it off. Everything I had said, all my panic, all my begging, all my screaming, was still broadcasting. The town, the county, maybe even farther. They all heard me. And now the static had spread from my booth to their homes. To their mirrors. To their pipes. And I was still feeding it. I staggered toward the door, desperate to rip the light down, to shut it all off. But when my hand touched the knob, it turned from the other side. Slowly. Deliberately. Someone, or something, was already trying to come in. The doorknob twisted in slow, deliberate clicks, each movement echoing like gunshots in the suffocating silence of the booth. My breath snagged in my throat, my body frozen between the instinct to flee and the paralysis of terror. I pressed my back against the console, staring at the door as the handle jerked, paused, and then turned all the way. The latch gave with a metallic snap. The door creaked open. At first, the hallway beyond looked empty. Just shadows stretching thin across the waxed floor, the faint glow of the exit sign bleeding red into the dark. But then I realized, those shadows weren't bending around the corners. They weren't cast by light at all. They were gathering. Figures peeled themselves free from the floor, black as spilled ink, their outlines humanoid but blurred at the edges, like a bad TV signal. Limbs too long, faces smeared and unfinished. They moved with jerks and stutters, as though each frame of their existence was out of sync with the next. One stepped forward, its head twitching to the side. And then, from its shifting, static thick body, a mouth opened, stretching too wide, splitting across where a face should have been. Mike. My legs nearly buckled. Hearing my name in that warped, multi-tone rasp, it was like my own radio signal had come back twisted, corrupted, sent from somewhere it was never meant to reach. I stumbled back, my calves slamming against the chair I'd knocked over earlier. My hand scrambled across the desk until it found the mic switch. Pure reflex. If I was going to die, I wanted to be heard. You can't be real, I stammered, my voice spilling out live across the airwaves. You're not real. The thing in the doorway twitched again. Its head snapped sideways with a wet crack. Then it stepped fully into the booth, the air bending around it, buzzing with the same static hiss that had been crawling through the speakers all night. Another figure followed. And another. Soon, the narrow hallway seemed to pour them into the room like a flood of shadows. My heart hammered so hard it hurt, but something kept me rooted there. Not bravery. Not defiance. Something else. A pull. As if every time that static-filled voice had whispered listen, it had been carving a place for itself inside me, and now that place was open, empty, waiting. The first figure leaned close. Inches from my face. The sound of its breath was nothing but pure radio hiss. And then, from its broken mouth, it spoke again. You've been calling us, Mike. I shook my head violently, tears blurring my vision. No. No, I've just been broadcasting. That's not the same. The thing's head jerked in something that almost resembled a laugh, though the sound came out as distortion, a corrupted chuckle that scraped against my ears. You opened the door. We just walked through. Behind it, more voices layered into the booth. Some whispered. Some shouted. Some cried. But all of them pressed close, filling the small space until it felt like the air itself had weight. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was a hallucination, that if I refused to see them, they'd dissolve. but that only made the sounds sharper. I could hear them pressing against me, brushing my arms and shoulders, their static fingers sinking through the fabric of my shirt as though trying to slip inside. "Don't fight it, Mike," the child's voice crooned from somewhere above my head. "You're one of us already. You've always been." The words burned. They knew me. They had been in my voice, my station, my signal. They had followed me home every night when I thought I was alone. And now they were here to collect. My body convulsed with a surge of panic. I threw myself sideways, slamming into the edge of the console. The equipment clattered to the floor, sparks spitting from a loose wire as it tore free. The sudden flare of light made the shadow things recoil, their forms flickering like a bad broadcast. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the open door, my shoes slamming against the tiles as I sprinted into the hallway. But I wasn't free. Because the voices followed. Not just behind me, but all around. In the intercoms, in the walls, in the buzzing light overhead. "Don't run, Mike. You can't outrun the frequency. We're already inside." The hall stretched longer than it should have, every door repeating itself, each turn leading back to where I started. My lungs screamed for air, my body drenched in sweat, but the layout of the station had shifted, warped into something that bent to their will instead of mine. And then, faintly, from the distance, my sister's voice again. Clear. Familiar. Cutting through the distortion. "Mike, stop. They're not chasing you." I skidded to a halt, my breath ragged, heart clawing against my ribs. Her voice was coming from the break room door. A door that shouldn't have been there, not at this end of the hall. "Come in," she said gently. "Let me show you." The static behind me swelled, pressing at my back, urging me forward. And against all reason, I reached for the handle. The handle was cold against my hand, unnaturally cold, like metal left out in the dead of winter. My palm stuck to it for a moment, a faint sting rising in my skin as though the door itself didn't want to let go once I touched it. The break room door creaked open, and I stepped through. But the instant I crossed the threshold, I knew I wasn't in the station anymore. The air smelled different. Not the faint tang of burnt coffee and mildew I'd known for years, but something older, sourer, like damp earth after a flood. The hum of the fluorescent light was gone, replaced by a low, thrumming pulse that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. In the room itself, it looked wrong. At first glance, it was still the break room, the chip table, the vending machine with the broken keypad, the crooked staff-only sign above the sink. But the proportions were distorted. The walls seemed taller, the ceiling too far away. The corners of the room bled into shadow that no light reached, stretching down into a blackness that felt bottomless. On the table sat an old radio. Not the sleek, battered modern ones we used at the station, but a relic, wooden, with 2 knobs and a cracked speaker grill. Its dial glowed faintly, casting a sickly amber light across the surface. The needle twitched even though I hadn't touched it. And then the voice came. "Mike." My sister. Clear. Crisp. Exactly as I remembered it before she died. My knees nearly buckled. My throat burned as though the air had turned to fire inside my lungs. "Lauren?" I whispered, my voice breaking. The dial twitched again. "It's me. I've been calling you for so long. Don't you recognize me?" Tears blurred my vision. Every cell in my body screamed to run, to fight, to refuse, but my heart ached so deeply I couldn't turn away. I staggered closer, my fingers trembling inches above the wooden casing. "I buried you," I whispered. I saw you lowered into the ground. You can't." "I'm not gone," the radio cut in, her voice sharp now. "I never left. You've kept me alive all these years, Mike. With your voice. With your broadcast. Every night you opened the signal, and every night I crept closer." My stomach twisted violently, bile rising in my throat. No, that's not true. I was just doing my job. Playing the music. Filling the silence. The static that filled the speaker wasn't noise anymore. It was breathing. Her breathing. Ragged. Familiar. "You don't understand," she said, the edges of her voice fraying into distortion. "The silence is the door. You opened it. You've always been opening it. And now I can step through." The shadows in the corners deepened, creeping up the walls like black water stains spreading through plaster. My reflection in the vending machine glass flickered, not matching my movements, twitching independently like a puppet struggling against invisible strings. I stumbled back, clutching the edge of the table. "What do you want from me?" The radio buzzed violently, the glow of its dial brightening until it cast the entire room in that rotten amber light. Her answer came layered, not just her voice but hundreds beneath it, voices I'd heard on the air that night, voices from calls I'd answered years ago, voices I didn't even recognize. "We want you to listen. We want you to join." The words drilled through me, a frequency vibrating in my bones. My ears rang, my vision blurred. For a split second, the walls of the break room melted away, and I saw where I truly was. A void. A vast blackness, stretching infinitely in every direction, filled with millions of flickering lights. Not stars. Radios. Radios stacked, floating, turning, each one tuned to a different frequency, each one whispering, sobbing, screaming, laughing. And in the center of it all, me. Or rather, a reflection of me. Sitting at a console. Headphones on. Speaking into a mic. My lips moving in perfect sync with the chorus of voices. I staggered, clutching my skull, pain exploding through every nerve as though my brain was being tuned like an instrument. The radio on the table hissed, and my sister's voice came again, calm now. Almost tender. "Stop fighting, Mike. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Just answer the call." The dial turned itself, slowly, steadily, toward the end of the spectrum. And I knew, when it reached the end, something irreversible would happen. Something that would mean there was no Mike anymore. Only the broadcast. My hands shook violently. I was standing on the edge of something vast, something I couldn't begin to comprehend. And I didn't know whether stepping back would save me, or if it was already far too late. The dial ticked forward, steady as a heartbeat. Each click sent a shudder through the floor, as though the whole room pulsed with its rhythm. My ears rang, my vision fractured into shards, but my focus locked on that glow. Amber, sickly, hypnotic. If it reached the end of the spectrum, I knew, without understanding how, that I wouldn't be Mike anymore. I'd be swallowed by whatever lived between those frequencies, lost in the tide of voices forever. And yet part of me wanted it. The exhaustion of fighting, of screaming into empty nights, of carrying a silence heavier than any static, I wanted to let go. To dissolve into that chorus and never be alone again. But then I remembered her face. Lauren. My sister. Not the voice twisting through the radio, not the static mimicry, but her real face, smiling in the passenger seat of my car when we drove to the beach, laughing as we sprayed cheap soda out our noses. That was real. And whatever this wasn't her. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles popped. "You're not her," I whispered, my voice shaking but hardening with every word. "You're not my sister. You're just using her voice because you know it's the one thing I can't turn away from." The radio hissed, the speaker grill rattling as though something pressed against it from the inside. "You don't believe that," the voice said, though now it cracked around the edges, no longer perfect. "Why would we sound like her if she wasn't here? She's been with you all along, Mike. She died with you." My stomach lurched. "What?" The shadows swelled, crawling up the walls, distorting the break room into a twisting funhouse of impossible angles. My reflection in the vending machine glass grinned wide, even as I shook with terror. "You don't remember, do you?" The voices layered together, a hideous harmony. The accident. The sirens. The static filling your head. You were both supposed to die that night. My blood turned to ice. Images flickered behind my eyes, too fast to focus, a crumpled car, glass raining across the asphalt, Lauren screaming my name, or ringing in my ears so violent it drowned everything else. But that wasn't how I remembered it. I remembered the hospital, the condolences, the funeral. I remembered surviving. Didn't I? The dial ticked forward again. The pulse inside the room matched the beating of my heart. No, I muttered, clutching my skull. That's not true. I lived. The vending machine glass shattered, a spider web of cracks racing outward, and from it my reflection stepped free. Not twisted or monstrous, me. Exactly me. Same clothes, same sweat-streaked face, same terror in the eyes. Only his lips moved when mine didn't. You never walked away, Mike, it said softly, almost pitying. You've been broadcasting from the other side ever since. My chest clenched, a pressure-like hand squeezing my lungs. Was that why the calls came? Why the static never stopped? Because I was never supposed to leave it behind? The reflection stepped closer, hand outstretched. Behind him, the voices grew louder, a storm of laughter, sobs, screams, all begging me to listen, to join, to surrender. The radio's dial ticked again, closer now to the end of the spectrum. I staggered back, sweat pouring down my neck, my vision swimming. Every choice burned. If I resisted, I'd tear myself apart fighting them. If I gave in, I'd lose whatever pieces of myself were still left. But maybe the cruelest truth of all was already dawning on me. Maybe I hadn't been Mike for a long, long time. Maybe all I'd ever been was a voice in the static. The reflection's hand hovered inches from mine, trembling as though it too hesitated at the edge of something irreversible. The shadows behind it shifted and pulsed, their voices swelling into an unbearable chorus. Some begged me to stay. Some urged me to cross. Some laughed, delighted in my confusion. And beneath it all, that dial kept ticking forward. Each movement reverberated through my bones, every click dragging me closer to a truth I had run from all night. My lips trembled. If I'm already gone, then why am I still here? Why am I still, me? The reflection smiled, sad and weary. Because you've been clinging to the mic. Your voice carried you, kept you tethered. But tethers fray, Mike. And when the signal ends, the silence takes everything back. The dial clicked again. The room flickered, dissolving into that endless void of radios I'd glimpsed before. Millions of them, each one whispering, each one alive with the souls of those who had answered the call. A galaxy of voices suspended in the static, waiting for eternity. And in the center of it all, me. I saw myself as I truly was. Not flesh, not bone. Just a voice, stripped from the body that had died in that accident years ago. The hospital, the funeral, the years of lonely broadcasts, they hadn't been survival. They'd been echoes. Memories stitched together by the static to keep me from realizing the truth. I hadn't been living. I'd been transmitting. The break room dissolved completely. My reflection merged back into me, filling my mouth with words I hadn't chosen. I felt my lips move, my throat vibrate, but the voice that came out wasn't mine anymore. Welcome home, Mike, the static chorus said. The dial reached the end of the spectrum. And the floodgates opened. Every radio in the void screamed to life at once, millions of voices overlapping into a tidal wave of sound. I felt myself torn apart, pulled through frequencies like pages ripped from a book, scattered into every signal, every whisper of static in every lonely room across the country. I wasn't me anymore. I was everywhere. In the hiss of a dead channel. In the crackle of a car stereo driving through the night. In the faint whisper of a baby monitor when the house is still. I was the voice in the static. And I wasn't alone. Lauren's voice wrapped around me, familiar, soothing, terrible. She hadn't been lying. She'd been here all along, waiting. And now, I understood, this was the true broadcast. A signal that never ended, carried on every wire, every wave, every silence. As the last thread of who I'd been unraveled, I thought back to the opening line of that night, the one I'd tossed casually into the mic, never knowing how true it was. What would you do if your dead loved one called you, from your own phone? Now I knew the answer. You'd pick up. You'd always pick up. And once you do, you never hang up again.